Hello. It's time. Time for Rick to sing. Oh no, wait. Time for Bruce. Yeah, you don't want any more of that. All right, everyone. We are ready to continue. I am pleased to introduce our colleague Bruce Fraser from Indian River State College, who's going to talk about the Deepfake game. Welcome, Bruce.
I am much shorter than Rick, so I need to make sure that this is adjusted appropriately. This has been a fantastic event so far. I don't know about you. I feel as if I'm fully saturated. There's so many great ideas and great presentations. I'm going to change gears a little bit here, and I think what I'd like to do at the outset is what I would call context engineering, because I don't come from an art and design school, and I'm afraid that unless I provide some context here, this may misfire a little bit. So let me tell you about my background. I studied philosophy as a graduate student, and I was really interested in an area of intersection between symbolic AI, philosophy, and linguistics. And this was 200 years ago. I got a job at a community college on the East Coast of Florida. Thought I would be there for a year, maybe two, and then ended up being there 25 years now. So when I got to Indian River as a professor of philosophy, nobody had any idea what I was talking about. And so a lot of what my professional experience became at that point was actually learning how to explain complex ideas in simpler ways. Not because people were unintelligent, but my students really didn't have strong academic preparation. I just tended to dwell in the abstract, and there's limited value there. So for 15 years, I was a professor of philosophy teaching courses like critical and creative thinking, which is more of a challenge than one might think. So these are two areas that inform the deepfake game, which really isn't about generative AI. It's about truth and falsity and the way deception plays out in language and thought. But it's very applicable now. The other area that really informs what's happening here is my practice as a meditator. And I've been practicing for 15 years. And the form of meditation is called Vipassana, which is very much about connecting with the body and reclaiming attention. And I think that reclaiming attention is something that's very important in this context. And so one of the things that meditation helps us see is just the nature of the mind as a narration engine, right? The way we narrate our experience. And we can intellectually acknowledge that. You know, we're all aware that we create stories to make meaning. Some of those stories are more central to our experience than others, right? But the interesting thing about meditation is that we start to see just how deep these narrative structures run, right? And so what I would say is it's helpful to distinguish what we might call surface scripts, the stories we tell about the things that are familiar, and then those really deep-seated scripts, right, which intersect with our values, with our emotions, with our sense of personal identity, right? So these are very deeply rooted narrative structures that we start to surface and unearth through this practice. And the relevance of that to the deepfake game is that these deep-seated structures or scripts really inform the way we engage with technology, right, with AI in particular. It informs the way we interpret things such as Alan Turing's imitation game, right? What does it really mean? What does it tell us about intelligence? It interprets the way we think of AI as a tool or an intelligence, whether we focus on its its probabilistic nature or expect it to behave deterministically, right? So there's a lot of deep structure here that's informed what I called the Deepfake game. And what's that?
25 minutes?
25 minutes.
Yeah. There's your slide maker. You said, wait, what, 25 minutes?
Oh. Yeah. Okay, I'm not even paying attention to my slide. That happens right away. I drift. That's the nature of philosophy. Yes, wait, what, 25 minutes? What are we going to do? Thank you for that reminder, actually, because I did take the opportunity in anticipation that I might drift to offload a lot of the content around the Deepfake game, and so I actually just built an Adobe Express page, and you can review all of the core content at your leisure so that we can just talk a little bit in these 25 minutes, right? So one of the challenges, what does this mean? At Indian River, we face a real challenge both inside and outside the classroom in terms of acclimating people to this new technology, helping them navigate the deep disruption associated with this technology. And so the Deepfake game was a way of helping students work into a conversation in a non-threatening way as to how to engage these technologies, how to establish their own agency in that space. Now, what I'm going to do here is intended for Indian River students and Indian River faculty. And the interesting thing there is that we're finding that many of the faculty are facing some of the same challenges as our students, right? So what I devised as an example of how faculty might engage students actually turns out to be useful for faculty as well. However, we are not an art and design school, and so you may look at the same thing and say, yeah, but this wouldn't work for our students or our audience. That's okay. What's important here is the meta logic, right? So I would like to ground any kind of activity like this for students or faculty in a common definition. And it's a working definition. It's not a technical definition, but it's something that allows us to point to the same thing. Say, okay, we know what we're talking about. We're talking about deepfakes, which are artifacts created by AI that are virtually indistinguishable from the real thing. What do we do about this? Because the feeling is, and it's not inaccurate, the feeling is that this is fundamentally disruptive to our conception of truth, right? Our conception of reality. And so people are rightly concerned and anxious about the emergence of AI deepfakes. So this is the way in. And I might start with an image. Sorry about that. I guess I'm a heavier breather than I thought. Start from an image like this, and just ask people, the audience, is this AI generated or is it authentic, whatever that means. Exactly, authentic. Right, and then have them reflect. Okay, now the interesting thing about the attention economy is that it draws our attention outward. When we think about deepfakes, we focus on the artifact. We are not focusing on something that is fundamental to deepfake detection, and that is our own minds and the way we narrate these images or videos. These are questions that are helpful to get people to reflect on the nature of a particular artifact. Then we might introduce a narrative. And I would have people consider, my students consider, well, does this change your judgment? And there's some interesting things that come up. This image was created with Adobe Firefly. Okay, so if you accept that, then where is your source of confidence that this could pass as an AI deepfake? And the answer to that is actually not so simple, and it doesn't lie there in the image, right? It lies in the narrative. It lies in my credibility, the nature of the context, the presentation. Right? But people tend not to focus on that type of thing, the narrative context around it. They focus on the artifact. What is it about this that tells me it's a deepfake or not? Okay? So I might inquire again, to see whether or not the students actually change their judgment about this image. Okay, and there are, you can build toward more complexity and more subtlety here. You can shift images. Is this an AI deepfake? Now, you're all quite fluent in these design spaces, and many of you with AI tech. For my students, these are not obvious questions. They can't just, from their own experience, determine that, yes, this is a deepfake or no, it isn't. Right? So I might start with one narrative, measure their impressions, and in this case, switch to a different one. I suppose I could be looking here instead of there, but it's so much more interesting to look at the big screen. Okay, so which one is it? This creates some dissonance for the audience, right? They start to think their own process of interpretation is disrupted by being exposed to different narratives that are not compatible. I might ask the same set of questions and then pose this. Wherein lies the deepfake? Now, of course, deepfake identification is going to involve a whole bunch of components: institutional, right, policy, IT, zero trust, provenance, authenticity initiatives, all of these things. And those are important, right? But what we tend not to focus on is the mental processing that goes into understanding where deception and truth lie. So wherein lies the deepfake? Not in the image or the audio or the video per se. It's how this image or audio is actually situated in the ecosystem of understanding and knowledge. It's in, a simplistic way to talk about this is to say it's in the narrative that's built around it, right? And so I think a hugely important capacity, as we prepare our students to operate and flourish in the AI augmented era, is actually to encourage what I would call narrative flexibility, right? Which is the ability to step back from the particular narrative structure that we're using to understand something and see alternative points of view. Okay, and there are many different ways of talking about this, but I like to use the term narrative flexibility. Okay, so I think we oversimplify deception. We therefore oversimplify and perhaps amplify the anxiety around AI deepfakes. Deepfakes are the result of the exploitation of certain expectations we have about truth and falsity. Is it interesting? I was struck by the quote that came up earlier. When you invent the ship, you invent the shipwreck, right? Well, when you have a system of representation and you have a set of expectations, you also open up the opportunity for deception. And so deception is nothing new. I've already mentioned this point about narrative flexibility. Deception is nothing new, and it's related intrinsically, I think, to our technologies, right? Language is a technology of a certain sort. When I use language to represent the world, it opens up the opportunity to use that language deceptively. I can tell you in the context of competition for resources, no, the resources are over there, knowing very well they're over here, right? Language allows us to deceive. Technologies allow us to deceive. And so there are some historical examples that I think are helpful in giving us context to what's happening now. Certainly with the emergence of the camera, the photograph, there became opportunities for deception, right? And it took time for us to adapt our social expectations and methods of verification to be able to handle these sorts of things effectively and without a great deal of anxiety. We are in a moment in which we have not yet found the new norms that will allow us to manage the introduction of these AI-generated artifacts into our knowledge ecosystem. So these things have to evolve. How do we encourage the evolution of a new set of standards? I believe that play is essential for our students. I think that if we try to, in the context of education at Indian River at least, we try to intellectualize this process of trying to develop new norms, talk about it theoretically, we lose our audience immediately. What we need are opportunities and spaces for our students to engage these tools imaginatively, playfully, and see what emerges. Okay, so the idea behind the Deepfake game is that we create an environment in which students or others can actually explore the nuances and complexities around truth and deception using these artifacts. And we might analogize this to the generative adversarial network, a way of producing images that uses competing models. One that we call the generator, you heard about this yesterday, the other, the discriminator. And so to use this analogy, I think is apt for students. And what we want to do is set up an environment in which students can playfully try and deceive each other using images, very much like what I attempted here at the beginning, although you may have been able to discern which was a deep fake and which was the true, the authentic image, right? And so this is essentially just a framework that one might use to build a variety of different types of games. You could do this as a virtual experience. You could do this as a live experience with other human beings. You have the generator, the discriminator. I would introduce an oracle. At least in the context of instruction, you need someone like the instructor who's able to guide the dialogue, the process, know what kinds of questions to ask, and encourage on the part of the students, so that it keeps things moving in the right direction, right? But you can also do this using AI itself. As I said, all of this is provided for you on the website that you'll see at the end. But you can also, build any one of these as an AI player. So the discriminator is the player that attempts to discern the authenticity or deception present in the artifact. And this is a way of helping students really appreciate, as I said, the subtleties of truth and falsity in this complex ecosystem. Now, I did create a GPT just to play the role of the oracle for a demonstration of this game that was fun with students. It has its limitations, but it is fun to play with these tools in the context of building that game experience. I am not a gamer. I mean, my operating system is traditional literacy, right? So I spend a lot of time with the written word. I imagine there are people here in this room who could take the idea and really, explore how it applies in different contexts and in different ways and be much more imaginative about it than I am. The thing for me is, as a philosophy professor, I mean, the questions of truth and deception are sort of core to what I do in the context of teaching critical thinking. We hear today, many people talking about the need for critical thinking in the context of AI adoption, and that's, what the 4D fluency framework is about, really, developed here at Ringling by Rick Dakin and his colleagues. So I think that's probably all I really want to say about the overarching concept. To me, the actual details of the game are less interesting than the philosophical membrane that holds all this together. But the idea, as I hope that you can see, is that instead of focusing or fixating on the nature of the object itself, we turn the attention to the nature of the way the mind processes information, the way the mind situates these artifacts in these broader narrative contexts, and help students unpack those contexts to gain a better understanding, with the ultimate goal being that new norms will emerge for distinguishing truth from falsity, and that this will be something that they can carry forward in the applications of AI in their own lives and work. Okay, I'm not going to go over all of this. Variety of applications, I'm sure you can imagine many more. I'm probably the only person who's in danger of being under time. But it does allow for a few questions. 5 minutes, I have 5 minutes. So this was my thinking behind the Deepfake game. I think it has some helpful applications in the classroom. I think that teaching AI fluency and connection with this game framework is really important. In my current role at Indian River, I certainly am encouraging the adoption of instructional innovations like this. They won't look the same in different contexts, but this is where we need to be focused so that our students are ready to transfer to programs where they are being asked to do creative work with AI, and that they have that skill set that is going to be helpful in discerning when to use the tool, when not to, and how to evaluate their own creative process, how to supplement it, how to improve it, and so forth. So that's an introduction to the Deepfake game. I think it squares with a lot of what's been said here in different ways. And so with that, I will just turn the time back over. Here's the website. So feel free to take what's useful, as a friend of mine says. And yeah, that's all I have for you.
Probably have time for 1 or 2 questions. I'm going to go to Robert.
Robert, asking a question.
I love your application slide, because the first application I thought of wasn't on there.
What's the application you thought of?
Training AI to overcome deepfake detection. So basically,
Nice.
I was looking at it as a system to amplify the Cold War of detectability of basically truth deception, and that's a Cold War that's being fought right now.
Yes.
Consciousness and image. I spent a lot of time working on that with videos and how to detect them. I spent a lot of time with machine learning to do that. And what's interesting is I think you identified a kind of human in the loop process where you can almost train out the different portions of those roles could be labeled by a human at different points, or sometimes occupied by some kind of foundational model, and other times by a human, but that the flow process of that would just basically create the data to train a deeper understanding of how humans read images. I think one of the problems we all have with images these days, and kind of the way we interact with these foundational models, is that we think of them that way, of like being where they fall down because they're not understanding our sense-making process to get there. Of course, that's what we were talking about last night. And I think that you have identified something really interesting that could actually be used to help models understand how we make sense.
This is.
How do you feel about that?
Well, so I think this is a comment on your comment, stepping up one level, and that is that we are so used to the idea that someone will operate in this space as an expert and tell other people what to do. And I think part of the big instructional shift we're going to need to see is that things need to be much more collaborative. I, as a professor, need to be willing to coach and facilitate and expect my colleagues in that space to come up with really interesting and new ways of thinking about the material. If I can put something out there that becomes a catalyst for your creative work, that should be something that's celebrated, rather than defaulting to that idea of, I'm the expert, I have this kind of moral and intellectual authority in this space. That is giving way to a much more collaborative, engaging type of space, and I think that's what you're illustrating at that point. Now, in terms of the content of your reflection, I think that's a fantastic idea. I think one of the things that, certainly one of the things that interests me is the way we anthropomorphize aspects of the conversation around what AI is doing. I mean, my intellectual academic interests align probably most closely today with something called mechanistic interpretability, right, which is how are these systems actually representing information? We tend to think they think like us, but that is to project. That's a deep script that's influencing the way we engage with these technologies. And so, anyway, I think I caught a sense in what you were saying that there is that tendency to do that even in the way we think about training, and perhaps there's something we can extract from this that would be useful in rethinking that paradigm. I'd say right on.
All right. Thank you very much.